and an innocent young actor from the show went in barefoot and were arrested. Ellen came up from New York and said, Mr. Patrick, you know these mama troops, they're unruly, and they're getting ready to open. And can you handle them for 2 days? Can you direct them for 2 days? Because I knew what Tom was doing. I said, sure, Ellen. So I went in, I went bopping into a rehearsal hall, told them, Tom's been arrested, it'll take you a couple of days to get him out of jail. I'm directing. Okay, scene 5. And they looked at me like, you're well, you know, it worked. They respected me. I even cleared up a few things that Tom had been leaving lyrical, and it worked fine. Well, Tom approved when he came out. It was swell. It was great fun. The bad thing that happened was Megan Terry, for her intermission, wanted to have the whole audience up on stage for a banquet. So part of my job each day was going out in a truck and buying a whole bunch of stuff, cheese and fruit and wine and stuff, and setting it up backstage and shoving it on intermission. Well, this was fine, except that because of our scandalous publicity, the show sold out this huge auditorium. And everybody said, oh, they're feeding us an intermission. Came up on stage, and 800 people on stage broke $100,000 worth of hydraulic lifts. Oh. Yeah. So that was fun. Actors swinging from ropes screwed into a ceiling not built for it. The ropes broke and the actors flew over the audience and broke their legs on stage. You know, these things kept happening. The stagehands were so contemptuous of all, because we weren't real theater people, that they were very careless of the orders I gave them as stage manager backstage. You know, they figured, we know what to do, we don't have to listen to that guy. Well, one of them cued. There was a scene that Megan had written in the play where a meat slicing machine came slowly from the back of the stage on wheels, you know, as the curtain went down, it came slowly toward the audience. Very scary, very beautiful. Well, one night as the actors were taking their bows after the show, one of the stagehands cued that machine. And he began to approach the actors from behind. I instantly ordered the curtain down. Thank God the actors were in front of the curtain, taking their bows, and ran on stage and manually unplugged the machine before it went through and cut Kevin O'Connor in half. The actors were furious because I brought the curtain down and turned out the lights before they'd taken all their bows. The manager of the theater was furious because I had broken through. I ordered someone to lift the curtain, and I backed on stage as the manager of the theater followed me on stage berating me, not aware that the audience was still out there. When he finished berating me, I let loose at top volume, and honey, I cut through a 400-voice choir in college. I let through with full blast at the things they had done, including the fact that his stagehands had just about murdered an actor. And before I was through, he realized that all the good people of Waltham were listening. We had no more trouble after that. Okay. I want some applause for that one. One other thing that happened in Waltham, I don't know if we're going to get through my whole life here. One other thing that happened in Waltham, and I have to tell this story, although there may be a gentleman. Is Peter Craig here? Peter Craig objects to this story because he says that one of the things somebody says in it isn't true. So be aware the punchline isn't necessarily true, but it is the punchline. A beautiful actor named Victor Lipari. You know, at any given moment, there's one boy off Broadway who is the most beautiful boy. Are you all familiar with that phenomenon? Amen. Mr. Gilman over here was, when I came to the Chino, the most beautiful boy off Broadway. There may be a couple more people out there who have been. William Hoffman certainly was. Bobby Cubero was. Stephen Davis was. You all know the phenomenon I'm talking about. I call him the golden apple. There's always a golden apple.
Fred Forrest.
Oh, Fred. Yes, there's always a golden apple. Well, at one point, the golden apple was Victor Lipari. Now, the man who captures the golden apple is always assured of fame and success. That's why he's the golden apple. How are you, Mr. Heidi? Paul Foster won the favors of Mr. Lipari and went on to become the best known and most influential off playwright of all time. Victor was not selfish with his favors. and would be first to be happy to have the world know that. Victor was in the La Mama troupe, a prominent member of it. Victor came down with hepatitis. Ellen said it was because he had bought new shoes during rehearsal. Maggie Dominic! Rehearsal. The doctor had other opinions of how he got it. And as stage manager, I had to be there, because I needed to know, did I have to replace an actor or not? So Ellen Stewart and I and the doctor were there with Victor, and the doctor very tactfully, this was 1969, said, Mr. Lepari, this is a highly contagious disease from intimate contact, and I wonder if there is anyone in your theater company who should be informed of the state of your health. And Victor looked, everyone. Peter Craig says that was unfair of him. Okay, we'll take a break now.
Here's the basket. I guess what we'll do is I'll stand over there and you'll donate. Okay? Thank you.
I'm sure some of you don't even know each other. Gwen, do you know that?
Oh, Mary Claire's here. Oh, good.
Mary Claire, on your right.
Oh, I'll come up.
All great Chino actresses. Dorit.
Somebody behind you.
Bob Heidi. John Gilman, get over here.
John.
Where's Harry?
Hi, Donald. Donald, I think people better start kneeling in front.
Where's Harry?
Move over to the microphone.
You've got to close it.
Move to the right, everybody.
Move over.
You've got to close it.
Yeah, Don, can you kneel in
Half
front?
the center is darkness.
John, can you kneel in front?
Move center stage, please. Center stage.
Find the light.
Find the light.
Yeah, kneel.
Find the light.
Donald, come over.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, everybody to the
This
right.
gentleman is
Everybody
not
shuttle
in
to the right.
Shove to the
Now,
side.
everybody say shit.
No, I'm fine, I'm fine.
Are there any other Chino people here?
Oh, I'm sorry, Don.
Don't go away.
Harry?
I think it's
Cigarette break.
Harry went for a break.
Well, I'd like a cigarette too.
You don't
I've got to go feed my partner.
move while Oh, you look great.
You say that. That's
Somebody drag Harry Katukis.
Where's Harry? Harry has to be here.
Judy comes
I want more flash. He's having emphysema break.
All right,
Okay,
my
that
darlings,
should be
thank
enough.
you. Bob, you can sit down.
These are for the...
Give me your hand.
I'm done.
Bob, I must have missed you by a minute up there.
Maybe by a minute, but I sat up.
Okay.
Did I mention everybody?
Yeah, you mentioned everybody. Yes. Where's Maggie?
Honesty out is so, you know.
Would you want to sit in the front row, Bob? Or this is more comfortable.
I will get them for you. And I have
There's a
to-
big
Oh,
step.
no. Why not? Living legend.
Oh, sorry. If you sit here next to
Michael, how are you? Fine. Did I mention you? No, not yet. I will. Hi, Gary. You were doing the bad things. Well, that's just it, you see. It's hard to mention all my friends while I'm talking about Oh, I don't know. I know.
Maggie, come on. I want one of these.
Excuse me, sir.
Michael McGrinder.
Oh, sorry?
Andy!
One way or the other.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Superstar.
Richard Smithies. You should be down here. We're taking pictures of Chino people.
Yeah,
Oh, my God.
Somebody's taking pictures of people taking pictures.
Pictures.
Robert's camera.
your right side.
Huh?
I got your camera. I'm taking pictures.
Okay. Who's that? Oh, Cindy, hi. How are you, my darling? You, what lovely hair. This is Richard Smithies. Richard, you know, even before you did, Gwen. Where's Gwen?
I dare say.
Where's Gwen? Gwen, do you know Richard Smithies?
No,
Richard acted at the Chino even before you did.
really?
Richard was in the first play that Lanford Wilson ever saw, which made Lanford want to be in theater. An Ionesco play.
Great.
Yeah. You saw that Bob Donna's here.
Usually, Tom will have
Peter, I called him. I called him this
I
morning.
know, I know.
I left him a message.
I'd love to have heard Peter's rebuttal to my story about Victor. He called me, oh, he was bitching me out like mad. He said,
Well, we all got
not
those
every,
shots. We got the shots. We all got shots.
Okay. Oh, I know. Would you tell him? Would you tell him that?
It wasn't a true event. I mean, it didn't. We all did get shots. We all got shots. No matter what.
I'm sure Victor meant it not just from him, but by a line of apostolic succession. Andrew Caldwell, I hate you. Why are you here? Andrew's my friend from Seattle. Wait till you see the pictures I have for you from the archives.
Do you need coffee or water?
Andy knows all of you people from 1,000 stories I've told him, from the pictures I took on the web.
But he's so young.
This is for Andy, like coming to Canada and Oz, I'm sure.
No, Augusto. All right.
Richard Smithies. When are you flying back?
Where are you from?
Tomorrow?
You make
What?
money.
Why don't you come fly with me? And then you can fly
Insignificant.
Where are you flying out of?
6:40 in the morning from Newark.
No, I talk to them every now and then because they get in my eye.
Okay, don't you disappear.
I won't.
Everybody, this is Harry Katukas. We want lots of photos of him with me. Okay, is Chris back? Is Michael back?
Where's Chris? I just...
We have 30 minutes. 20 years, 30 minutes.
A year a minute.
Take a couple of hours.
I think I should start, right? Yes. Okay. We left off with Victor Lipari. Mary Claire Sharba had a comment on that. Mary, where are you?
Well, I gotta say that I don't think he actually had relationships with everyone, but we all got shots.
Okay.
Why? I remember being carted off in a bus. Always to be shots, and I never had one of those before.
Okay, we got to finish with the 70s. We got to finish with the 70s real fast here. We may not get out of the 70s. Okay. Also, now, Mr. Terry Talley is here. Mr. Talley was a member of the Spring Street Company. And we're going to talk now about a second generation of off-Broadway and how things changed. It will sound as if I'm saying things got worse, because that's how it seemed at the time. Okay? All that happened was a new generation came in that didn't know off-Broadway hadn't always existed. And that made a big difference. Mr. Talley and some friends of his were with the Spring Street Company. They did the best physical production I've ever had of a play, Night of the Golden Circle, in 1972. It was brilliant. I got photos to prove it. Ellen Stewart wanted to move it to La Mama. You understand, by now, La Mama was a place that practically every month a new hit Broadway show came out of. I exaggerate, but Godspell had just opened at La Mama, and wham, world fame. This was a fantastic break for a show, right? The Spring Street Company said, we never heard of it, we don't want to move there, and we don't want to keep this set up because this is our home, and took it down. Right? I'm sure Terry and others regretted it ever since, but it was like that, you know. On the one hand was this fantastic achievement, on the other, people didn't know about it yet. And there were people coming in who had no appreciation of the scope of it, what it had cost to make it, or what it could do. And this caused a whole lot of confusion for the next decades. Tom Horgan, I have to tell the Tom Horgan story. Tom had done Hair, and I think Lenny, and Inner City, and was the hottest thing in the universe. They wanted him to do Jesus Christ Superstar. He didn't want to do Jesus Christ Superstar. He didn't like Jesus Christ Superstar. Tom and I had always wanted to work together. So I brought him a play called Mercy Drop. He loved it. We were all set to do it. It was just the right combination of my words and opportunities for his ebullient staging. So Paul Foster and I dropped over to Tom Horgan's loft one night to discuss production, because Paul wanted to be involved. He loved the play too. So Tom was rapping on about it, and his lover came in and said, Tom, there's a phone call I think you should take. Tom said, oh, okay. He went out. He came back in with his face gray with shock. He said, Bob, you wouldn't believe the money they just offered me to do Jesus Christ Superstar. I'm going to have to do it. So Mercy Drop didn't happen. I've never felt about that funny little gnomish man that writes that music. Also ran into a lot of other kinds of people who off-road had become very attractive. Okay, and I was working with kinds of people I hadn't worked with before. Not only people who were, say, a little bit middle class and didn't understand the knock-down, drag-out, nitty-gritty way we had to work, but also people who didn't know how to work at all. I finally had a production of Mercy Drop with a great cast, but I was very confused by what I saw happening in rehearsal. I thought, well, the director has some vision. They won't know until it all comes together. So came a costume parade, you know, when they were having great costumes, and on came the leading man in a terrific-looking jumpsuit. He said, I love it, but shouldn't I have a pocket for the gun? And the director said, what gun? Well, there was the climax of the play, the hero pulled a gun and killed all the other members of the cast. And the actor said, the one that I killed all the other members of the cast with. The director said, oh my God, is that what you've been doing when you wave your finger at rehearsal? That's disgusting. We can't put that on. We'll cut that scene. So I had to postpone the show and fire him and redirect it. But, you know, believe me, as a playwright, you never want to hear a director the day before opening say, what gun? I recall another director whose classic phrase was, what bedroom door? Okay, so it was like that. The kinds of people that were to work with were changing. I went to work in a lot of places. I worked in the theater in Chicago that went wonderful for a gay theater, the longest lasting gay theater in the country. And then I discovered that the money I'd been giving them to pay for advertising for the shows, they had stolen. That was the first time that happened to me, that I ran into financially dishonest people in off-Broadway type theater. Again, I was terribly naive. I didn't think people would go into off-Broadway who weren't kind, wise, loving, and honest. You know? It was a bit of a shock. I guess I'd better jump to Kennedy's Children. I ran La Mama Hollywood for Ellen until, oh, thank God, you're still the prettiest boy off of Broadway, John. I ran La Mama Hollywood for Ellen until I just became so depressed from working with two kinds of people. One was people who did avant-garde plays in hopes of getting jobs at commercials and who acted in them that way. And the other was a young actor from New York I brought out and decided to be in love with, who wasn't in love with me. Got tired of working with that kind of people. Just at that moment, somebody in England said they wanted to do a play of mine called Kennedy's Children, which every theater in the world had turned down. I mean, in the world. The guy had been trying to peddle it all over Europe as well as America. No one would touch it. And then this bankrupt pub in a slum in London that was going to have to close anyway said, we might as well close with a play we like. But they didn't think anybody else would like it or come, so you know, that's why they were doing the closing. They did scrape up enough money to bring me over. Okay. The morning after it opened, I signed contracts for the play to be produced in 60 languages. It was a big worldwide hit. I was suddenly in a whole other world. I had money, I had fame, I had a little power. I brought Joe Pichette and this other actor over to London to play in The Haunted Host for two reasons. One is they were the best conceivable cast for the show, as the London critics agreed. The other was I hoped my new fame and power would make one of them fall in love with me. They fell in love with each other. I will not be hypocritical enough to say I couldn't blame them. That was a bad thing that happened at this time when supposedly everything was good. I went down to Cape Town to direct the play. All my friends in England criticized me for going to work in a fascist country. I said, if you're talking about the race thing, honey, I'm from Texas. I mean, where I grew up, if there were places for blacks to drink, they were labeled colored only. I mean, I knew from race prejudice, okay? The main thing was there were no blacks where I lived because they wouldn't let blacks live in towns that I lived in. I knew about that. That was no surprise to me. What was a surprise to me about South Africa was the police state aspect of it, that people were actually afraid to talk about things because their maid or their husband might be a government agent. That was new. That was scary. We didn't have that in America back then. So I told my friends, I said, I'm sure I'm going down to do my play. I can't think that my play is so valuable that apartheid will crumble if I don't do it there. What's more, it'll let me see how things are there, and I'll come back and write about it. Before I left, the people at the theater I worked at, the brave, fine people, said, Bob, please don't write anything about this, because if you do, it will only get us into trouble. So I went back and didn't write about it, and all my friends in England who were waiting for me to prove, you know, my political correctness by writing against South Africa, decided I was a phony. That wasn't fun. I went to Vienna to promote a production of Kennedy's Children. It was fine, except they had cast this great big square-jawed Teutonic drag queen in one of the women's roles with no explanation. Still, it was fun. Until the day I was leaving, when it was time for me to get my check for royalties coming there, and they said, oh, we've used your check to pay for that party we gave you last night, didn't we tell you? I've got to tell you a few of these stories. I went to Caracas to see a production of my play T-Shirts. It was the first gay play done in Venezuela, and the president of Venezuela gave a party for me and said, this great, important event, this is unofficially the first play at the Caracas Theater Festival. You know, I'd never been treated like a world event before. Every celebrity in Venezuela, all the TV stations, everybody came to opening night. It was thrilling. And then I found that someone had neglected to tell the translator it was a comedy. And it was the most tedious hour of theater in history. I practically had to sneak out of the country. My host wouldn't even speak to me in any language. I mean, that's because you're not here. I'm going to skip a lot of stories and tell you about a specific day in my life in London to show you. I reacted badly to success. I was not ready for it. I was not made for it, okay? I lived in a room above the King's Head, the pub that did the play, in a room that was used to store potatoes and coal. I didn't move after the play hit. Why should I? I hated my life anyway. I woke from my drunk of the night before about noon. I stumbled downstairs. I stumbled down to Piccadilly Circus, the center of London, to see a play. I caught a matinee of a play called John, Paul, George, and Ringo, a wonderful play about the Beatles that never made it here. At intermission, the manager came over to me and asked if I could please leave and come back for an evening performance sometime, and I said, fine. He said, see, I was in all the papers at that time. He said, your appearance here at a matinee where mostly proletarian people come is causing such excitement that the whispering is disturbing the actors. I said, okay. So I left from outside, and I got on a bus to go back. He said, a bunch of schoolboys got on the bus and saw me and said, oh, there's the famous fellow. Ran over to my side of the bus, and the ticket taker, the conductor, asked me to get off the bus because it was in danger of toppling over from the boys' attention. She said, really, sir, you should take taxis. I got downstairs. I walked back, having nothing else to do. I killed time by walking back to King's Head. I crossed Leicester Square, where there was a newsstand with my picture on the cover of magazines. And from like anything else, I saw a matinee of Barbra Streisand and Funny Lady, the worst movie she ever made. I saw it about 15 times that month on similar days. I even sat through the after feature Jersey, Isle of Contrasts. I went to the King's Head bar. I mean, not to the Arts Theater, where Kennedy's Children had moved by that time. And they have bars in theaters there. I guess they do in in New York now, too, don't they? They have bars and theaters. Anyway, they had bars and theaters. And I went to the bar to start my evening drinking. And I heard a voice beside me, a lovely voice, order some drinks. And I turned and looked, and there was the loveliest human being I've ever seen in my life. Like a human doe, a red-haired, green-eyed doe. And I was filled with one of those magical moments. I said, Miss, I don't know if you're an actress or not, but even if you're not, you have such magnetism and power and beauty, charisma. I would love to direct you in a production of Joan of Arc, because anyone would follow you anywhere. And I really felt this would give meaning to my empty life. And she said, oh, I wish it were so. And then someone yelled, hey, Vanessa, where are the drinks? It was Vanessa Redgrave. She's more beautiful than she photographs. That's why I didn't recognize her. And she turned and wistfully walked over to a bunch of people who, as it turned out, what they were planning was to close my show. In protest against something or other, Vanessa went backstage at intermission at Kennedy's Children that night and tried to persuade the actors to walk out. One of them said, oh, Vanessa, for God's sake, and threw her down 2 flights of stairs. I did not know this was happening because I was attending some big celebrity party. For what in the world, I have no idea. I think it was Tom Stoppard's birthday. I gave him an obscene calendar, and it happened there were people photographing everything at the party. They photographed him unrolling the obscene calendar, and it was in all the papers the next day. So that gives you a very bad reputation in England. So that was a bad thing. And Tom, of course, just said, oh, how did you know? I talked to John Cleese because he and I were the only tall people. You know, and we happened to share an agent and knew each other. So we said, the next day the columns all accused me of trying to seduce John Cleese. Actually, they said playing Romeo to John Cleese's Juliet. I suppose I was supposed to climb up his balcony, I don't know. And that wasn't a very good thing to have said about you in London at the time. And the next day I heard about Vanessa's accident. And the next day, as I came out of seeing Funny Lady and Jersey out of contrast yet again, headed for baby drinking, I passed Vanessa, who was strolling around, covered with bruises and bandages, I suppose looking for another show to close. That was what fame was like for me, okay? So, you will understand why, as soon as possible, I found something else to do with my life. I used the fame. I keep using that word, but you know, there's no other word that it gave me, the temporary fame that it lent me, to affiliate myself with the International Thespian Society, a high school theater organization for which I traveled to over 1,000 schools in the next 10 years. I went around promoting high school theater, which is, after all, most of the theater in this country. And it's terribly important, and it's terribly neglected, and all it has become really is a branch of Broadway. They do Neil Simon, they do Godspell, you know. I mean, those are fine shows, but if that's all the theater you ever saw, it's no wonder that you don't go see any when you grow up. So I went around trying desperately to get some connection between the new theater and the school. It was a lot of fun. It never happened. After 10 years, when I visited some of these schools 5 or 6 times, they were still doing Hello, Dolly and Charlie Brown, and still saying how brave it was of me and how fine it was of me to come offer another world of theater, you know? And it was all talk, and I gave it up. I was pretty worn out after 10 years of it. In the meantime, and this, well, first I have to tell you, I wrote for several years, I wrote for a paper here in New York called Other Stages. Does anyone remember it? The first Oliver paper?
I have them all.
Yes, they're wonderful. I wrote a column called State of the Art, which was the first column ever written by an actual practitioner of off-Broadway about what the day-to-day, moment-to-moment life was like. I loved writing it. It was a lot of fun. But during the years that I was writing it, the paper never got one approving letter. You can look through all of them, Bob. Not one approving letter about me. It only got 2 or 3 complaints, which I'm happy to say were all 3 nonsensical. Okay? But I am told that it ruined me in theater in New York. Okay? I would sit in Phoebe's down the way. People would come by my table, look around, lean and whisper, I agree with what you wrote this week. I'd say, oh, how nice, why don't you write a letter? They'd say, oh, I wouldn't dare. Okay? So I am told, I do not know this for a fact, but I've been told by a number of people that the simple facts about our life off Broadway that I wrote in that column for several years absolutely wrecked me in theater. Something wrecked me in New York theater. Things began to go very badly for me. Okay, I have a lot of bad things to go from here. I have one great, good thing to go through. I affiliated myself with a lovely troupe of beautiful, young, talented children called the Fourth E, of whom Bonnie Young, raise your hand, Bonnie, and Carol Nelson, the founders, are here, and Terry Talley, who joined us. Are there any other Fourth E people here? I really can't see. Okay, we did, I don't know, 24 shows together. We did shows by other people, by members like Ross McLean and Steve Nelson and Terry, and we paid for them by doing plays of mine. Okay, it was a lovely relationship. We worked, for the most part, in a verminous ruin down the block. When I say verminous ruin,
it was.
The top floor had rats and floorboards that you literally could fall through. The second floor had asbestos coming from the ceiling. The ground floor had termites that would swarm out of a hole in the stage and literally cover the stage like glittering black sequins. The bottom floor had maggots in the carpet. But it was ours. It was ours. That is, I had a place where I could do as many shows as I could talk the 4D kids into doing. And I really wanted to be busy because I didn't like life much. I liked art. And they were right. We did fantastic shows. We did some crummy shows, mine. And we did lovely shows, and we did a lot of shows. And, you know, basically they paid for themselves. We came out of it without much damage except a few years older, maybe a few nerves shorter, or a few short nerves.
Bob, would you talk about the Kennedy's Children on Broadway, and also the one about Sally Kirkland?
Well, I was going to tell about Shelley. I think there's time.
Okay.
Well, the Kennedy's Children on Broadway, there's only one bad thing to say.
Yeah.
We did it, we opened it in Boston. Everybody told me, oh, no, this is a show for little cafes like the King's Head, or little theaters like the Arts Theater. Bob, I said, come on, I write plays. They can be done anywhere. We opened in the enormous operatic-sized Wilbur Theater. And my English agent, who was predicting failure, said, my God, it can fill any theater. I said, you bet your ass it can. Shirley Knight was brilliant. Once in your life, you should have a performance that perfectly realized. It was, what can I say, Clive Donner did a brilliant job of taking an essentially static play with, which is all monologues, and with subtle movement, enriching it beautifully. The bad thing, we had only one day in the Schubert Theater before we opened in New York. We found out very quickly why they gave it to us at such low rent. It wasn't, as they said, because it admired the play. It's because it's a lousy theater. You cannot be heard in the Golden Theater. I'm sorry, did I say Schubert Theater? Schubert's own it. You cannot be heard in the Golden Theater unless you walk down center stage and shout at the audience.
Okay.
All of Clive's beautiful staging simply had to go, and the actors just took turns coming down front and talking. At that, we tore the one preview house up. I mean, the actors were so good. Unfortunately, the opening night audience loved it so much that the actors expected that reaction second night, and when they didn't get it, it kind of stunned them. It was a little limp, opening night. Actually, Don Parker and Barbara Montgomery got better reviews than Shirley for opening night, but as they regained themselves, it soon became clear that Shirley was powerhousing the show, and she got a Tony Award, which she well deserved. When the show went on tour, I was in Seattle directing a company of it at the second stage, and I was setting light cues during a thunderstorm and the phone rang. So I could barely hear what was being said, and they told me Shelley Winters was taking over Barbara Montgomery's role for the tour. I said, oh, fine. I didn't know. I said, oh, fine. I didn't know why Barbara was leaving, but, you know, I thought Shelley Winters would be fine. And I thought they said Sally Kellerman was taking over the hippie role. Again, I didn't know why Kailani Lee was leaving, but Sally Kellerman was a great actress. Well, so it was fine, and I was busy. A couple of weeks later, I was flying to Europe, and I stopped off in New York to see if my agent had any mail for me or any news. And I called her, and she said, oh, get right down to the Golden Theater and see the Shelley Winters Company rehearsing Kennedy's Children. I said, Shelley Winters Company? I went down. There was Shelley Winters on stage as an impoverished school teacher in a black Balmain cocktail dress with furs. She also had on stage 2 working telephones so she could keep in touch with her daughter and an ex-husband's family in Italy. She also had a dog and a maid who came and took the dog from her, which was her Tennessee. I'm not kidding. Sally Kirkland, not Kellerman, was playing the hippie. Now that in itself might have been fine, except Sally had a bleach blonde Vidal Sassoon haircut to play this the degraded, demoralized hippie. And Shelley had had the director sign a contract that they could all improvise. She said, since it's monologues, we don't have to get cues, and we'll improvise like we do at Actors Studio. Shelley talked about her experiences with Trigby Lee, Dag Hammarskjöld, and her experience in being the only person to create the racial rights movement in America. Sally Kirkland talked entirely about her then affair with Bob Dylan. Morgan Freeman Jr., have I got his name right? Morgan Freeman Jr., who was, Al Freeman Jr., who was cast as the soldier, had translated the entire role into Ebonics. Farley Granger, who was playing the gay actor, an off-Broadway actor, was wearing a tweed and sweater outfit suitable for an English gentleman and managed to forget every line suggesting his character was gay. And upstage, beautiful Anne Wedgwood waited until she was sure this pack of loonies had stopped talking. Delicately got off her stool, came down stage, spoke her lines beautifully, and got back up stage for Al to start snapping his fingers, or Farley to start nodding his head, or Shelley to wave her hands and talk about Adlai Stevenson and Mary Martin. Or for Sally to come down and say, I really love Bob's Hollywood Home. I mean, it was a nightmare. Some nights, I could not stop it. It was opening in Chicago. I had worked with the theater in Chicago. I built a reputation in Chicago. This show was going to get fantastic attention. I couldn't stop it. I tried getting Shelley and Farley to learn lines. At first I thought they just wouldn't, then I realized they couldn't. They simply did not know how to memorize lines. It was amazing. I begged Shelley to fake sick and quit the show, and she said, well, Bob, you'll make me think you don't want me to be in your play. It was just nightmarish. They opened. Some nights the show ran an hour longer than on Broadway. Some nights it ran an hour shorter, depending on what they took it into their heads to say. It was a nightmare. The reviews, of course, were disastrous. One review said, Shelley Winters trapped in rambling, repetitious play. After the reviews came out, Shelley suddenly remembered things she had to do in Europe and skipped contract and skipped the country. I sued the producer, he sued Shelley, and there went my American career, if there had been any chance of one. Okay, is that what you wanted to hear? I did not make that up. Okay. I would like to talk, how much time do we have?
5 minutes. Get 5 minutes.
I'm awfully sorry. I'm not going to be able to finish with all the bad things in my life. Let me pick the words.
You can keep going. You can keep going.
Well, aside from the 4th E Company, the 80s were a very bad time for me. Much of it my own fault. I told you I'd tell about bad things I did to myself. I made a great mistake in 1980. I was hooked up with an agent who was psychopathic. She was contractually tied to a lot of my most popular plays. She wouldn't be bought off. I sold the plays to someone, like Let Them Handle Her, on the assumption that I would be writing other plays at least nearly as successful. I didn't. The rose fell out of my teeth. My plays were not commercially successful after 1980, and things got really bad for me financially. I spent a lot of the decade and the 90s sleeping in the light booths of theaters where I worked. Sometimes I'd do a show just because they had a comfortable light booth to sleep in. I was moving. I finally gave all this stuff to the archives at Lincoln Center in La Mama, but I was carrying around ragged boxes full of plays and photos. Bad time. I hope it never showed. Just some of the worst. When I was doing my first show with 4th E, I got a call from a theater I'd worked with in LA called the Deja Vu. Its owner was called Smitty, and he said, Bob, why are you doing this to us? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, well, we're opening t-shirts. I said, yeah, I mean, I don't make any t-shirts. He said, well, why are you refusing to sign the equity agreement? I said, I really don't know what you're talking about, and I'm in rehearsal. He said, don't lie to me, Bob. They told us you'd refuse to sign it. They're going to close the show and not let us open. So I called Equity. And I had bad luck with Equity before. I called them about Shelley. They said, oh, honey, she's a star. We can't do anything. So I called, and this guy said, oh, yes, I'm the one that's been calling. I've been meaning to call you. I'll send you this form. I said, okay, fine. And then he said, no, I'll come down. It's too important. I'll come down to where you rehearse. I said, fine. Well, I went out for coffee. For years, I thought he didn't come, but Carol told me that he did drop by and stay just for a second when they said he was gone. I told him, have him call me. Well, understandably, Carol, who was waiting to go on in dress rehearsal of playing Carla and his children, forgot to tell me, which was fine. I understand. I mean, for all I knew, he just hadn't come. It didn't matter anyway, as it turned out. I got another call from Smitty the next day saying, Bob, why have you done this to us? We're having to close the show because you wouldn't sign that agreement. And that's where it rested. An old friend was furious with me because he refused to believe that I simply had not been given the agreement to sign. Well, what I found out years later was, in fact, the Equity man had seen rehearsals of the show, felt it had commercial potential, wanted to option it and produce it himself, and did not want other potential producers to see it, and had arranged to close it. He never intended for him to sign. In fact, for 2 years, he told the actors in the show out in California that he had rights to the show and had them do audition performances for backers. You know, I reported this to Equity. I discovered that he had done similar and worse things to many people. And in fact, the Dramatists Guild, I believe, put out a special issue of their newsletter entirely devoted to things he had done. He still works for Equity. He was never inspired. People wonder why I don't
Who is it?
deal
What's
with
his
it.
name?
Huh? I don't even remember his name now. Huh?
What's his name, George?
Perfect relationship with the
Right.
the lease.
I remember.
And a company without my permission had done it in Los Angeles. The actress at the first read through said, I'm not going to do this place, got faggots in it. They never did the performance, they didn't even finish the read through, but the way the equity thing went, they had to do it in the lease. They
Right.
had to bring in the Los Angeles cast,
Yeah.
or bring them in as an A-class road company, which is a lot of money.
Right.
I think we had to close.
Right. The relation, Equity has never adjusted to the fact that there is off-Broadway. All its rules are still for the days when the producers were money people and had actors in their power and treated actors badly, and rules were made to protect actors in commercial productions from really rotten criminal producers, okay? Off-Broadway, where the actors are the producers, those rules don't make any sense. I knew an actress who got tired of the audition racket and decided to do my play, My Cup Runneth Over, to showcase herself. And I said, sure. And then she called me and said, Bob, what can I do? Equity is making me pay $350 in case I don't cast myself in the show. I mean, it got that crazy. Well, I mean, the rules don't apply to the situation. That's why it's so crazy. But whenever rules are irrational, they will be enforced by crooked or irrational people. That's the trouble. An irrational setup like that lets in crooks. Do you know what I mean?
That's our government, right?
George Bush.
Yes. Speak directly into the Homeland Security microphone. At one point, I was asked over at Theater New City to sign an equity agreement about a show, and I read it through, and they had modified it. It was no longer asking you to pay the original cast for 100 years if somebody else did the show, and it seemed nonsensical but fair. So I was about to sign it, and then I read the last clause. It said, furthermore, the signer agrees to obey not only the above rules, but any changes or additions equity might make to this code in the future. And I called him and I said, you are aware that no court in the Western world, at least, would hold anyone to a contract that allows you absolute carte blanche over their life. They said, but you see, it's not a contract. It's a letter of agreement. You're right, it is like our contract. Anyway, so a lot of actors bridle if you start criticizing equity, and understandably, because it protects them in the world of commercial theater. But, you know, I saw certain shoulders in the house stiffen when we started talking about this. It doesn't belong off Broadway. It never did. It has nothing to do with it, and it has materially hurt people's lives and careers. Amen. I don't know what else to crowd in here. I wanted to talk more about the Fourth E. Can I just say they were wonderful and let it go at that? Okay, I worked with Mark Warren, Mark Richard. I worked briefly with another wonderful company, Mark Warren and Ozzie Rodriguez, who most of you know, started a company called Dramatic Risks. And I worked with it briefly only because the people who housed them, who thought they were doing a great thing housing this little company, were astonished when the work Mark and Ozzie did was so good that it began to get grant attention and press attention, and they wanted to rewrite their whole arrangement with Mark and Ozzie where they got the money, and Mark and Ozzie were not particularly open to that. Have I got it pretty much straight?
More or less, yeah.
And they left, and you know, but it was a fun company to work with. Terry Talley did my Proof Positive, one of my most popular plays, first at the Dramatic Risk Company.
And they didn't know what to do. They were terrified. To run the people.
Oh, not Mark and Ozzie.
No, no.
The other people were absolutely horrified. It had never occurred to them that there might be a homosexual character in a play. It was pretty
With
strange.
AIDS. With AIDS, yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to. I found. I don't think I ever had much chance of any future career in the commercial theater, but I didn't make many steps because, except for the money, I really hated the world. Like Shirley MacLaine and Julie Newmar came to see Kenny Children, and they hurt me. They're both big, strong women, and they both grabbed me and clenched their fingernails in my arm, saying, "Oh, why didn't you make me play Carla?" You know, I mean, I was physically hurt, and I just stayed away from it. It wasn't any fun. The money was fun. The rest of it I didn't like. But I discovered, as I offered my new plays to people who were glad to hear from me because I had been on Broadway, they wouldn't even read the plays. They'd say, "What's the matter? Isn't it good enough for Broadway? Is that why you're offering it to us?" I mean, it like, you know, they say once you give something away, you can never sell it again. Well, I discovered what prostitutes learn. Once you sell something, you can never give it away again. I worked for a dreadful company called the Irish Repertory Theater. Carol did a show for me there. Which may be the second worst company we ever worked for. They were horrible, dreadful people. They practically deserted us as I tried to do the production. They lied. They took days off. They were always drunk. They skipped rehearsals because of the fairies told them it would be bad luck to come. They were opposed to almost any mention of sexuality in the play. And I think they hadn't read it before they did it because it was full of sex. They and the other worst company I'm going to tell about did the same thing to us. I was going to send out publicity. They said, "Oh, no, of course, we'll send that out." So I had the flyers, programs, and press releases made, put them in envelopes, addressed them to all of our huge 4th E press list. After the play opened, I found them lying on it without stamps on them in a desk upstairs. They hadn't wanted to publicize a show done by outsiders. So we got no press, you know, and that was hateful. The same thing happened to us with the press at another theater. What was it called? The New Vic, the Old Vic?
The New Vic.
The New Vic. We were getting a little tired of the treatment we were getting at the Verminous Ruin. Oh, I haven't told them about the lights. For instance, the guy who ran the Verminous Ruin Theater liked the money that our shows brought in, but he didn't like us because we were not him. he wanted to produce shows. He wanted to be like La Mama. And I said, well, if you were like La Mama, you'd be down in the basement putting Lysol on the maggots of the carpet. Ellen runs a clean theater. He said, no, tell me Ellen's secret of how she got so successful with so many grants. I said, well, she keeps a clean theater. She keeps it in shape. She sees that the artists have what they need. She does everything possible to see that they get audiences and appreciation. He said, well, if you're not going to tell me, you're not going to tell me. All this reached a peak when we came in for the opening of Terry Talley's play Before Caesar, in which I was playing, for some reason, Cicero. I dyed my hair white. I didn't know what else to do. And we discovered all the lights were gone from the theater. We ran to the owner, who said, oh my goodness, they must have been stolen. We stared at him and he said, oh no, I remember now, I took them upstairs. Some were broken and I took them upstairs to fix them. We waited a moment more. He said, well, actually, I rented them out to somebody, but I've got other lights upstairs I'm putting together for you. We followed him up. There were shattered bits and pieces of old lights about. Well, it turned out he had stolen the lights for his own production of a musical about Alexander the Great upstairs. Okay? He attempted to run when we pointed this out to him. I say that I was only threatening to bang his head against a brick wall. Carol says I was going to bang his head against a brick wall, and only her husband Steve stopped me. He says, she says. At any rate, Bonnie Young solved it by calling and ordering the lights we needed from a rental company, paying for them, and then standing behind the manager's back and taking the ticket money from him for both shows until she had gotten the amount she'd spent on the lights. So we decided to look for other places to work. We went, it is too true. We went to the New Vic Theater, okay, where we're doing a play of mine called Spitting Tree. I do not know why the woman who ran the theater let us do it. She obviously didn't like the play and didn't like us. She treated us wretchedly. It was as if we were being punished for anything bad that ever happened to her in her life. I would say she lied to us. We had a photographer who did photographs, a wonderful photographer. She said, no, I got a photographer. Gave us his address. I called him. He came in and took some shots. We never saw the photos. He kept saying, well, what do you want the photos for? I said, promotion for the show. And finally I said to him, look, she says that you take photos for all those shows. He says, I haven't even seen her for a couple of years. And it was like that with several people she said would do the work. Like she didn't trust us to know people who do the work. And she fantasized that she had people who do it, or else she didn't want us to have publicity. We never figured it out. And I go on at length about this because this is the kind of person that more and more I ran into. Strange, weird, sick, neurotic people. It was impossible to tell if they were inept or malevolent. You know, and she too left. I discovered all of our publicity stacked on her desk unstamped. She hadn't sent out a bit of it. It was a terrible experience. Not to mention poor Carol having to act in 1910s clothes with no air conditioning. But more and more I ran into that kind of people to work with. I'm going to tell you just some of the worst stories because we've got to get you out of here. Well, the very worst for me, there weren't any 450 people involved. I did a show called Blues for Boys. I did it twice here in New York and twice in LA with long runs at both places. We ran it for 6 months in an off-off theater here, and anybody who has done off-off knows that to run a show with 12 characters for 6 months off-off Broadway, I was exhausted just from rehearsing replacements. But it was very successful, and we always gave part of the money to the Harvey Milk School for Gay and Lesbian Kids here in New York. I did it once here. My friend Alan Gassman did it once here. I did it twice in LA, where I discovered that the